is being recorded.
So we have a demo coming up from Jason Wang of kubectl Explain. Jason, can you show us your demo? We can't hear you, Jason. Are you talking? So while Jason is restoring his microphone, I'm sure we all know that kubectl Explain is a great way to get documentation to appear on the command line, and also it is used for putting schemas so that the command line can process before sending to the API server. Jason, can you speak? Jason, we can't hear you. So I'm going to propose that Jason stop demoing, restore his microphone. Maybe we can move on and Jason can rejoin. Jason, are you on mute?
Yeah, I'm currently unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Oh, excellent.
Okay. All right. So yeah, sorry about the hiccups. So basically, I don't think this is more like a demo. It's just a kind of a notice or just something we introduced in 1.4. And basically, in Kubernetes, we in starting 1.9, it started to support structural schema in its CRDs. Previously we didn't have schemas in our CRDs, so it's more like a free-formed kind of objects every time people create Istio APIs. So what we did in 1.4 is we introduced the schemas. So if we look at some files, so these are some CRDs I pulled. And if we look at probably a cleaner one, besides the actual like CRD definition, we introduced this OpenAPI v3 schema, and these schema just at this current stage, it's more like a structural schema. So it describes what the object looks like, what are the fields, how are they structured, what are the types, even the enums.
Jason had always texting me that nobody can hear you. Can you guys hear Jason here?
Can you hear me?
Nobody can hear
I can hear you.
Oh, I can hear you fine.
Okay.
Go on, go on.
Okay, cool. All right. Cool. So where am I? So basically with this, we get a bunch of kind of benefits out of this. So one of the things we mentioned kubectl Explain, right? This is more like a kind of API doc inside kubectl. So what we can do is, let's see. So I'm having 1.5. So this is, I think the feature is in beta starting 1.15. So I can only have a demo for versions after that.
That's important for everyone. I have not been able to run this myself because I have 1.14 Kubernetes.
Right. So 1.14 is in alpha, so you need to turn on the feature gate. It's
make your prompt bigger.
Okay. There we go. Yeah. So we mentioned in the upgrade notes that let's see, where did I mention it? Yeah, this is for kubectl Explain. This needs to be 1.15 plus. So yeah, let's try it out. Okay, right. So CRDs are created. So what we can do is, let's see. So kubectl explain virtual services. I think virtual service should work. There we go. So we can see this is the top level kind of structure of the virtual service. And if we do go into the spec, and we can see the spec here, and then if we like with the description, right? So if we want to get a whole view of what a service is like, we can do recursive. So with that, people can see the entire what is a virtual service and what's inside it, what's the type I need to put it in, so on and so forth. So with that, so if I, for example, so I have a sample virtual service. This is just a good one. So just to kind of apply it, should have no problem. But if I do something like, for example, here, if I just to demonstrate, like if I have some unknown field and true, and also if I put it, say the weight should be an int, but here I put it as an string, then what happens is it will be rejected, and then it will say something like, "Oh, we got weight should be integer, but got string, and there's an unknown field."
That is coming from the client, correct? Not from the webhook for validation?
It's not from the webhook. It's not from the client. It's from the API server. So the API server has the schema. It's so it before the even triggers webhook, it will do the validation.
If you did that up to 100, you would have got that as well.
If
the weight didn't add up to 100.
So that's a kubectl inline. So it cannot be So it cannot be detected by excuse me. Cannot be detected by the schema.
So can I ask a question? The source of truth for the schema, where you have, is that getting generated? Because right now, like the documentation and the types and all that stuff currently is documented in the proto files only, right?
Yeah, so that's being generated. So we have in tools, we have a tool called Q, and then Q is generating proto to Open API schema, and then we're adding the Open API schema to the CRDs.
Okay, so part of the build process is now pulling in, reading the protos, converting it with your tool to create these Open API schemas and installing them so that all this nice kubectl validation and explain stuff all just works. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, very
So
nice.
I think this is wonderful work, Jason. I really appreciate you getting this done. I tried and failed myself to get this to happen. Could you add something to the release notes so that everyone sees this as a new feature that you implemented?
Yeah, the release notes already, I don't have it open, but the release notes does have it. And then it's just have a one line, and then the release notes directs to here for more information for the customer. I think it is just more of a challenge for the customers when they kind of migrate to the new version, and then they have kind of wrong types or wrong names in their old configurations. So we mentioned here that these are the steps that we recommend they take, but we also note that existing configuration already in Kubernetes are not affected. So if they don't change anything in running cluster, it won't affect anything. But if they have a new configuration rolled out or something, like either they do kubectl create, kubectl apply, they will hit this error if they have any wrong configuration. So that's the steps we we say like these are the types things, and we also say use analyze as well to detect bigger problems.
That could cause somebody's workflow to break. Like if they want to deploy the exact same thing they successfully deployed before in the new cluster, the act of deploying is not going to cause issues that were not previously caused.
Probably,
Which, we can say it's by design.
Yeah. But I think it gives us a better future where like we kind of restrict more like things in our CRDs, CRs instead of.
Well, and that also depends on your definition of successfully deployed. Yeah. Like the deploy exited with status 0, but as far as actually creating effective configuration for a mesh, you failed.
It was always broken, but now we know it's broken.
Yes.
Yeah.
So great. Do we have anything else for you to show us on this, or shall we move on to the next thing?
Oh yeah,
I was just going to remark that I think kubectl explain is used by tooling for generating messages. Like, have you tried using VS Code yet with any of these CRDs?
Not yet.
I think the Kubernetes extension actually is powered by kubectl explain.
Oh, okay.
So you could imagine you could actually edit some YAML and actually see these documentation in your editor, which would be super cool. You can do that for free.
Good demo for the video.
Yeah, you should try that out.
Yeah, I will try
At
that.
least
I don't know, so yeah, okay, we'll try that. Okay, that's all for the demo.
I have one more question. So it sounds like this is sort of I don't know, conflict, or it's Istio control analyze and this kube control explain seem to be alternative ways to do a lot of the same stuff. So do we have anything in the operations guide that talks about these two different ways to do your validation? Or?
So somewhat they can overlap. So an extension to the structural schema, you can specify things like required fields, things like what a field like regex or something to check the field. They can overlap, but I think the biggest gain we have to have the schemas there is we can make sure that, because when Istio analyze the resources, it actually needs to wire things up, right? So from a raw specification. So we can make sure that with the schema that the customers input of their configurations wired up to a specific proto or the in-state in-memory object that we have, Istio analyzed can recognize, right? So that's I think a big step there. But in terms of just the fields validation or something, some of the things we are already doing in Webplug as well. So I think there's some, but I think it shouldn't be too much a worry as they're the same. It's you can do multi-validations. I think that should be fine.
Yeah, I think I kind of buy the argument that they don't, they're not totally, overlapping it, but and there's some justification for having both and using one for one thing, one for the other. But seems to me that we need to document that in the operations guide. Because there is a document now that talks about Istio control analyze, how to use it and what it does. Either that document should sort of talk about this as well, be generalized to talk about this, or have another doc that talks about and at least mention each other.
That's a good suggestion. We can mention this in part of the Istio analyze.
We should do great.
All right, because this is Kubernetes 1.15, not everybody's going to have this yet, Frank.
Yeah, so that's the other point. You definitely have to put big warnings around it and say this is requires Kube 1.15.
Sorry, go ahead.
The next presentation is David Ebo talking about Istio analyze. David, are you here?
Yeah.
Can I?
You can start presenting your work and then also discuss how it relates to this to help Frank understand.
Hey, Ed, I had a quick question for Jason, if that's okay.
Oh, go ahead.
So I understand how the OpenAPI schema validation works. I feel like, to Frank's point, there's more overlap with Galley's validation than Istio CTL analyze. because the validation webhook will reject some of this. So after this change, are you also simplifying some of the validation webhooks, or is it like hopefully we can just automate this process where this open API schema itself does all the work for us, right?
Right. So the blocker there. So we thought about this. So the blocker there is currently. So OpenAPI v3 schema is a very broad schema. It's based on JSON schema. The problem is currently Kubernetes only supports what they call a structural schema. So structural schema is more stricter than the OpenAPI v3 schema. So it has some limitations of what it can specify in terms of like restrictions or something like things I mentioned, like required fields, regex, it can be achieved. But if you want to between different fields, like for example, if I want a field A set and then field B also set, that cannot be achieved by structure.
So if that's true, we should at least remove some of the things that the Open API schema gives us.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. I think that's definitely on the. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So the next one, if you could just go to the documentation for Istio Analyze. I have the link in the agenda.
Okay, so I need to go back here. Put it up.
To 3 different validators all doing the same thing.
Well, overlapping.
So I just wanted to take a minute here to show that we now have preliminary documentation for Analyze. So we really try to target it to be extremely efficient. Like you can literally get started in under a minute. So the way the documentation is worded is that it basically lets you download the very latest version. And we're doing something that is somewhat controversial in the sense that we're pointing users to the absolute very latest daily build. We're trying to make sure we have enough tests so we don't break it. But the reason we're doing that is to make sure that as we write new analyzers, pretty much daily, that they get the absolute very latest, since this is just a client tool. So
this is going to now pick up the latest version of the CLI tool, which may or may not be 100% compatible with the current release. Isn't that true?
That's the thing. This is the version that you download of Istio CTL here is meant to be used only for validation. And it can be used for validation on clusters that are both older and newer. But you're not supposed to use this version of Istio Cuddle for general use, which is, it's a little bit tricky. But right now, this is how we basically get everybody to play with the absolute latest.
I would definitely put one of those warning banners right in this doc here, and the getting started under 1 minute. This is only to be used for validation.
That's fair. That's fair. So anyway, right now we feel the tool is starting to pick up steam. Internally, we've had a lot of people try it. Like anyone now in the Istio community should be able to really, with no prior anything, just under a minute, be running Analyze against their existing clusters as old as 1.1 or so. We're hoping people will try it and give us feedback.
I also just want to really quickly thank everybody who's been contributing analyzers. We've had a lot of people in the community jump on this, and it's been really awesome to see and really great to help. And we've been able to get a pretty great library started from all your efforts. So thank you.
Enjoyed making my contributions. And I want to call everyone's attention that I have a PR that makes the error messages appear in red and yellow. If it requires a top-level approver to add a library. I hope someone can review that shortly so we can see red for our errors.
All in favor of colors.
Quick thing. So I know I added one analyzer. Old habits don't die so easily. And I'm supposed to write the docs for it. I hope everyone is doing that. Just my experience from building and maintaining IstioVet, without documentation, it's very difficult for people to actually use it. I'm not talking about documentation for the overall tool, but individual messages. So
definitely,
yes. Yeah, it's a big part that we need to make sure that we don't skimp on.
I think the next part was Joe was gonna.
Oh, I don't know what's next on the agenda. Me?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. You want to mute and I'll mute.
Has everyone used Istio Cuddle Analyze? See it?
I guess we didn't really have a demo prepared per se, but yeah, the beauty is easy to use.
Whoop. Yeah, try again. Go.
Try again. Got it. All right. Can everybody hear me? And hopefully not blindingly loud noise.
Can hear you fine.
Awesome. Okay. How do I actually don't know how to present on this.
You go to the meeting.
The up arrow round button.
Great. So I'm also presenting locally to our own system, so I'm so confused right now. Okay, I think I got.
Dave,
all right.
present just one thing at a time.
Which would just be. So I'm like doing a double presentation here. In fact, can somebody else host the one in this room? That'll be a lot less confusing for me then. Sorry about that. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, so this is so I wrote a quick doc that I'd like to on in this meeting for people to look at. I tagged Snibble and Chris for reviewers, but anyone is welcome to look at it. So essentially, I was really interested in running Istio Cuddle Analyze in the CI situation. So when you have a change that you want to apply, it's very common to be able to run like a linter on your config or something like that to try to catch issues that might come up before you apply it. But in order to do that, we need to have some sort of way to control what messages are considered errors and which ones aren't, as well as being able to say, like, tag a resource and say, for instance, yes, I know this sidecar is out of date, but I don't want to like halt my entire CI system because of that. So I wrote a quick doc that hopefully won't be surprising to anyone. It's just a mechanism for being able to specify 3 ways to suppress messages. And if you've ever used a linter, it should feel very familiar. That was my goal, is that it feels like a linter that people have used before. So the only, I'm not going to go through too much of the design doc, but I will talk about the 3 methods because I think they're the most important part. Specifically, it allows you to suppress messages generated on a per resource basis. So if you have a pod that Istio Cuddle Analyze is complaining about, you can explicitly add an annotation to the pod to turn off that message. And that's different than turning off the analyzer itself. If you turn off the message, that means the analyzer can still run and generate different messages. All you're doing is you're saying, I explicitly acknowledge that this issue that the analyzer is creating is not a problem.
And you're talking about suppressing per message and thing it's reporting about.
That's right, per message and resource. It's like a tuple of resource and message that you would be suppressing. That's option 1 here. This is the most fine-grained one. The second one is you can actually suppress it on a that you can do the exact same thing via command line as well. So for instance, if you're running it locally and you don't have permission to modify the object or something like that, there is another way you can add that parameter. And then the third thing is to actually be able to list analyzers that you want to or not run. In this case, I said analyzers and excluded analyzers. I'm not in love with the command line argument names, but the idea is basically you can choose which analyzers you run and which ones you don't. And there might be different reasons you do that versus suppressing messages. For example, if an analyzer runs very slowly or there's a bug with something, you can just turn the entire thing off.
Control command you can run to see what are all the analyzers that are going to run. So you could say, oh, yeah, I don't want this or that.
Yeah.
That is probably a prerequisite for this, and it's not called out here, so I will add that.
In the linked issue where we
thank you.
The linked issue 17443, where we're talking about being able to specify what analyzers to run, we do call that out as a requirement that we need to surface to the user a clear list of what the analyzers actually are, one way or another.
So I will go ahead and call that out in the doc too, but luckily there's an issue provided there. But yeah, we need to actually describe what the options are before you can choose them. That makes total sense.
This is really useful also when we eventually add eventing to say, I don't want events for a particular type of analyzer or a particular type of messages. So is this proposal going to incorporate that, or is this just a command line filter right now?
When you mean eventing, do you mean like Galley generating messages and putting it on the status field, for example?
That's one way.
You mean like an event on the CR or the source, I guess. So I called that out below that there's two longer term goals, which is to have a config object that lets you not have to specify all these arguments. Linters commonly use that, but option 5 lets you actually store that in the cluster itself as a config map. And that way Galley could reference that config map and use the exact configuration. I didn't want to call that out as a goal of this initial design because I wanted this to be fairly incremental. But it would be, we're basically thinking about how we can express this, the command line configuration in an object, and then hopefully we can also publish that in the cluster so that things running in the cluster can consume that as well.
Would there be, if we had both config map and annotation based, would there be any particular reason to prefer an annotation suppress over suppressing it in your config map?
I imagine that would be if you have different roles. So if you have some sort of mesh admin who controls the high level configuration that they want everybody to be enforced, but then you locally want to have like a stronger configuration, you might want to sort of override those parameters or add things that I just totally came up with now. I admit I didn't think too hard about that, but that would be one case where it would be useful to have those controls.
That happens to actually be what I was about to say. Joe, this is Daniel. I think one of the biggest things that we'll run into is not even that, you know, an admin will want to specify some base set of things to analyze, but on the contrary, that the set of resources and the set of analyzers that an admin type wants to run are actually disjunct completely from the analyzers that someone who owns a particular service or application is going to want to run. And so we're going to need to make sure that it isn't a one-size-fits-all thing, and that the differing roles have the ability to run completely different sets of analyzers based on their use case.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I haven't documented all about using analyzers as policy. Right now, I'm just focusing on the API situation where the user themselves would have to take action. They can decide whether they enforce it or not. You could imagine in the long term, you might require a cluster policy that says you can't, like some sort of web validation that says you must pass all analyzers.
Yeah, right. The CI system, you may not even need to talk to your cluster, right? Because if you have all your resources specified locally, you could imagine that you're doing all your analysis locally. In which case,
I think you should do
that config file makes sense.
Yes, and I think I was actually going to, in my imaginary, and I haven't documented this, but I was thinking you would actually want to do both. Check before. So for instance, if you just need to look at the local files, that could be on your Git repo, and then nobody can even commit it, and you don't have to embarrass yourself pushing out a PR and then having it fail. And then the second one would be after it's committed, being able to validate again in your CI system.
So
I haven't called that out at all. That would be a separate doc, I think.
2 points, Joe. One, I'm really uncomfortable thinking that config map is our chosen way of configuring things and not CRDs. So unless there is a strong reason to not make it typed, I wouldn't, or I shouldn't say typed, but config map can become a rabbit hole of things which no one wants to validate completely. So let's see if we can make a CRD if that's possible.
I agree with you.
Second, for policies around gets, because analyzers are just doing get operations and not mutating resources, I would recommend not to add more fine-grained policies just because how Istio works right now. In Istio, for virtual services and other things, you can have one namespace affect any other namespace. So we don't follow any RBAC boundaries to begin with. So trying to stipulate boundaries on an analyze tool, it's not the right thing right now. We are going to.
When you say stipulate boundaries, are you talking about using analyze this policy, or? Okay. I am happy not to talk about that in this doc because I did want to keep this incremental, but I agree with everything you said, and it probably needs its own design.
So just to be clear, though, Joe, what you're proposing here is completely orthogonal to RBAC, right? This is about suppressing noisy or irrelevant warnings or avoiding unnecessarily expensive computations. It's not about respecting the confidentiality of certain resources.
It's so option 5 unfortunately brings that issue up, which is putting the common config in the cluster, because then you have to sort of think about
I think that would
what
only-
that means.
I think that would make
but
the
yes.
most sense for the galley status update case. But other than that, it seems like the local configuration.
If y'all want, I'll just delete that line and say, you know, we got that in thoughts, because that is a fraught issue, right? Because when we're talking about how to, like, it's still much easier to use number 4 with CI. Number 5 is something we should think about and talk about, but probably not in this doc.
I think number 5 makes sense if you're talking about the status field update case, right? So maybe
Okay.
it's a similar situation where, you know, you've turned on enable analysis, you have the status update thing going, so all of your resources have a status field with validation messages, but you know some of them are noisy, and so you just need some way to tell Galley to ignore them. And maybe config app's the right way for that.
Well, I'll remark here that there's a lot of other issues coming up, policy and who's running analyzers, and then we'll talk about the most simple thing first, but then follow up with another doc.
So who do you have on the approval list for this one? I mean,
Ed and Chris. And Chris has given me feedback. Unfortunately, it was in the wrong doc. I had 2 copies of the doc, which is really a good idea, which meant that I had to move or merge a bunch of stuff and delete the old doc. Sorry about that, Chris. But I took everything you commented on and put it here. So hopefully this is the most up to date.
So there's another thing to consider about priorities in terms of when to implement this. So currently our set of analyzers are very less. In terms of, in my mind at least, I would rather have a richer set of analyzers and then add something like this. That's just for priority. If we have people and resources to do both, let's just do both.
I will admit that the MTLS ones that I'm working on, I think are higher priority than. But at the same time, I do want to do this sooner rather than later, because I think it would be really useful to show how to use Istio Cuddle Analyze in the CI system. But without having any tools for controlling, I feel like it's going to be awkward.
But I get Niraj's point that have we encountered a scenario where things get really noisy? And until that happens, you know, the priority is not as big.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Maintaining Istio Vet for a while, which runs in CIs, no one complains.
Oh, okay.
And the truth is, if it's something that really bothers somebody, they can solve this today with grep.
True.
If they set up Istio Cuddle Analyze today in their CI system, they could solve a lot of this on their own. Now, granted, it's going to be nicer if we support it directly, but it's not a blocker for anybody today.
Fair enough.
I would still try to get an approval on the design. The implementation doesn't come until potentially later.
Yeah.
That sounds reasonable to me.
I absolutely agree. This is something we should do.
Joe, currently it doesn't, Istio Cuddle Analyze doesn't even set an error level. There's a work item for that. Are you doing that one?
No, but I know, I think he is doing that. Who's sitting over here that you can't see. But I think he's tackled that one.
Work with him to make sure that that gets in, which will justify the need to suppress it.
Yeah.
and to Ed's point, I would just say, let's get 1.4 out with a rich set of analyzers, get some feedback, whether it's noisy, whether it's useful, or some other means of doing things. And then definitely this is a useful feature in my mind, but some user feedback will be good.
Fair enough. I agree with that.
Analyze scope to a cluster or to a specific namespace that you're running in?
So right now, Istio Cuddle Analyze is scoped to a single namespace. So
whatever namespace you pass to the -n option, is that the idea?
Whatever namespace you pass in, or whatever's in your kube config, it's in your context that you specify. So, and I should also clarify that it is looking for problems in a specific namespace, but while it's looking for problems, it has access to all of the namespaces, which means that if, for example, in the namespace you're analyzing, it has dependencies, it can find those successfully and everything's great.
You're analyzing sort of that root namespace, but it doesn't recursively start going in those other namespaces. Just the references are kind of confirmed. Is that right?
It does a one-time snapshot of everything, and then does the analysis, and it only keeps stuff for the namespace you care about.
There's a flag though to run it on everything, all namespaces.
We do not currently have a flag to run it on all namespaces.
I can imagine that'd be a comment.
But if you really want, you can solve with Bash today. True.
If you know them all. But yes.
So the trick is, here's the problem with all namespaces. I think it's going to be very rare that you always want to run it on all namespaces. For example, it's not ever going to make sense to run this against the Istio system or Kubernetes or Kube system namespaces. So
or IBM namespaces.
Or IBM, right? So basically, if we have all, we also need to specify some way of knowing what resources are data plane versus control plane. And I think it's simpler, at least for now, just to have the users say what namespaces they actually care about.
Fair enough.
Chris, sorry, I don't agree with this. Just because I think passing that burden on for a cluster administrator is really difficult because of the way Istio resources and APIs are defined. I actually don't know what things are affecting me or what things can affect me. So I'll give you an example. For most of the configuration, you walk all the way back to root configuration namespace or config namespace, which is Istio system. So actually things in Istio system sometimes are more relevant than things outside it. So
I think that's true, but you're not going to analyze, like we know those are correct, self-contained, so that.
So this is where I'm talking about.
Correct, but you're starting at some other namespace.
Validation pick up errors that
You're probably too far.
Okay, so we can have our validation pickup errors that run things in Istio system. The difference is we're not actually looking for errors in Istio system resources. Does that distinction make sense? Because we are assuming Istio system is basically correct. We're not looking for user validation errors there because the user shouldn't be.
Yeah, exactly, that's right.
that's an interesting assumption that things in Istio system are only defined by the Istio people and what you get out of install. I don't know if that's correct, but we have to see.
There is a question of how secure that lockdown it is, but yeah, in theory it should be. That's protected stuff it's tested and correct, right?
And if you really want to validate against Istio system, you can. You might get some weird results because I think we have some things in Istio system that break some of the assumptions that we define for data plane namespaces, like the host port prefix thing, for instance. Some of the Istio system resources don't follow that.
So just out of curiosity, do you see the restriction as something we'll lift? We have more, like you can imagine the analyzer should be smart enough about which namespace they're running and do the right checks and basically do the right thing so that if you're pointed against Istio system, it knows that it's a system resource.
Well, that's just it. How do you know that Istio system is a system resource?
Will you be putting annotations on the pilot pod to say that it doesn't have a sidecar or something like that? You'll use those annotations that we talked about in the last document to suppress those things that make sense.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. So
should we follow up issue to talk about?
So you're right. That would make sense. So that if we were or just analyze everything, then it would make sense to have kind of a default suppression list that goes with it.
Yeah,
I agree. If we are analyzing everything, don't give users frivolous warnings. Yes.
Makes sense to run this Istio control analyze part of our build process against Istio system to make sure no one's added any invalid stuff in. So that's another test. If it, again, with the appropriate things suppressed that aren't really errors, then that would be a reasonable build step for us.
Because you can imagine two things will happen: either something broke in Istio system, or our analyzer isn't up to date. Either way,
you'll catch both. Yeah, it's a test case too.
Yeah.
I hope that we can use this to analyze the samples directory soon.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's where I was going at. So I think Jason Young already tagged me saying, how are we going to make sure that the analyzer logic doesn't deviate from pilot's resolution logic? And I don't have a good answer to that.
Yeah, especially with like the hosts, the way we're dealing with hosts and namespaces and FQDNs, there's kind of complicated, and it would be nice to find some way to unify that, or or like you said, at the very least, to make sure we're not deviating. That's definitely a longer conversation, though.
It is.
That's another example of why it'd be great to run this as a build step, right? So that you can have test cases that confirm that this is saying the right thing against the code that's being changed.
That would help, I would say, some integration tests where we verify the actual functionality versus the warning or error.
Yeah, you could, right, yeah.
Thank you for this presentation. I think it's great work. I want to just show the remaining list of 1.4 user experience items. They all have owners. If you are the owner of one of these and don't plan to have it by 1.4, please untag yourself or change the due date. I've got the status is confusing working. This is the returning an error level that we just talked about. I don't know this one at all. I have not looked at this one at all. I have not looked at this one. This one I'm hoping to get, this will be done automatically as part of Greg's work. And this automate installation multi-cluster, I have to get back and study that some more. I looked at that earlier. If you have any items that you think are going in 1.4 or need to, please tag them as 1.4 or let me know.
So for the Istio Cuddle analyze success and failure, this overlaps with several kind of more fine-grained issues. So those are being tracked kind of separately. Basically, we could talk offline about how you want to handle that, I guess.
Okay. So that's all I have for today. Do we have anything we want to set up for in 2 weeks? If you don't know now, add it to the agenda or ping me. I will add it to the agenda.
And the team working for Istio CTL Analyze, I think maybe in 2 weeks or so, we should decide how we want to handle deviations from pilot logic. Because that has been the biggest problem we had when we had Istio vet. Somebody changes something and now the vetter is no longer valid.
I agree. I think we should come up with a plan for that.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.